Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The forest felt alive tonight, a low, constant hum vibrating through the air as if the ancient trees themselves were whispering secrets. Merlin stood at the edge of the forbidden woods, his sharp eyes scanning the darkened horizon. The night was still, yet the atmosphere carried a weight that pressed against his chest. He had felt this before, long ago, when forces older than time itself stirred from slumber. But tonight was different. Tonight, something truly ominous had awakened. Arthur's voice broke through Merlin's thoughts. "What do you make of it?" The king stood beside him, clad in simple armor but still exuding the nobility of his office. The weight of Camelot rested on his shoulders, but his gaze was as steady as ever. Merlin's eyes narrowed. The Sorcerer King, his legacy a broken bar, its resurfacing. Arthur's brow furrowed. "That's impossible. The tomb was lost ages ago." "Sealed." "No tomb stays sealed forever," Merlin murmured. He turned to Arthur. "And Morgana knows this as well. She will stop at nothing to claim its power." Arthur clenched his fist. "Then we must stop her." The hum of magic intensified, as if in agreement. Merlin gave Arthur a solemn nod. The fate of the world, as it so often did, lay in their hands once more. The journey to the Sorcerer King's tomb began with an eerie calm. The world felt suspended in time, the clouds hanging low, thick with the promise of a coming storm. Merlin and Arthur rode through the winding paths of the dark forest, accompanied only by the steady thrum of their horses' hoofs against the earth. "We're being watched," Arthur said, breaking the silence. Merlin didn't respond immediately, but he had felt it too. The eyes of the forest were upon the Ama creatures of the old world, remnants of a time when magic ruled supreme. He sensed their presence in the air, in the ground beneath them, even in the shadows that danced between the trees. They were not alone. As they rode deeper into the forest, the trees became denser, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. The path narrowed, and soon they had to dismount, leading their horses through the tangled underbrush. Arthur paused, placing a hand on the hilt of his sword. "Do you hear that?" Merlin stopped, listening. At first, there was nothing but the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. Then, a faint whisper, barely audible but unmistakable, reached his ears. It was an ancient tongue, one that only a few still remembered. "The Guardians," Merlin said softly. "They're testing us." Arthur's grip on his sword tightened. "What kind of test?" Merlin raised a hand, motioning for Arthur to stay calm. "Not everything is solved with steel, Arthur. Sometimes, it is our hearts that are weighed." With a deep breath, Merlin closed his eyes and let the magic flow through him. The whispers grew louder, swirling around him in an intricate dance. He reached out with his mind, connecting with the ancient spirits of the forest, offering them his presence, his intent. The forest responded. The trees parted, the path ahead revealing itself. The guardians had granted them passage, but it was clear the journey would only grow more treacherous from here. Morgana stood at the edge of a cliff, her dark robes billowing in the wind as she gazed down at the valley below. She had felt the awakening as soon as it had begun, the pulse of ancient magic surging through her veins like a song she had always known but never truly understood. The Sorcerer King's legacy was calling to her. Beside her, a figure emerged from the shadows. The necromancer, a servant of the old ways, bowed his head slightly. "Everything is in place, my lady. The tomb will soon be within your grasp." Morgana turned to him, her eyes burning with a fierce determination. "And Merlin, Arthur?" "They are on their way," the necromancer replied, his voice raspy like the dead he often commanded. "But they are fools. They will not reach the tomb in time." Morgana smirked, though there was no joy in it. "They will try, nonetheless." "They always do." Her gaze returned to the horizon, where dark clouds were beginning to gather. She knew what awaited her at the tomb, a power beyond imagination, power that could change everything. With the Sorcerer King's knowledge, she could finally break free from the chains that had bound her for so long. She could reshape her destiny, remake the world in her image. But she also knew that Merlin would not let her take it without a fight. And Arthur broken bar Arthur had always been her weakness. His stubborn righteousness, his unwavering belief in her redemption. It had once stirred something deep inside her. But that was a lifetime ago, and now there was only one path left for her to walk. Merlin and Arthur reached the first of many trials as they neared the heart of the forest. Before them stood an ancient stone altar, its surface etched with runes that glowed faintly in the twilight. The air around it hummed with magic, and as they approached, a figure appeared, a ghostly apparition of a sorcerer, clad in robes of gold and crimson. "Who seeks the legacy of the Sorcerer King?" the apparition asked, its voice echoing through the clearing. Arthur stepped forward, his sword at his side. "We do. In the name of Camelot, we seek to protect the world from those who would misuse its power." The apparition's eyes flickered to Merlin, and a knowing smile crept across its ethereal face. "And you, Merlin, what do you seek?" Merlin met the ghost's gaze, unflinching. "I seek balance. The legacy of the Sorcerer King must not fall into the wrong hands." The ghost studied them both for a moment before speaking again. "The Sorcerer King was once a man, like any other. He sought knowledge, power, and in the end, it consumed him. Do you believe you are stronger than him? Wiser?" Arthur's jaw clenched, but Merlin spoke first. "It is not about strength or wisdom. It is about understanding." The Sorcerer King's fall was not due to his pursuit of knowledge but his inability to see beyond himself. "We do not seek his power for personal gain." The ghost's expression softened, as if Merlin's words had struck a chord. "Then you may proceed. But note these: that the path ahead will test more than your resolve. It will test your very souls." With that, the apparition vanished, and the altar before them shifted. A passage opened in the earth, leading downward into the darkness. Merlin and Arthur exchanged a glance before descending into the depths. The air grew colder as they ventured deeper underground, the walls of the passage slick with moisture. Arthur's torch flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the stone walls. Merlin could feel the weight of the magic pressing in on them, growing stronger with every step. "This is no ordinary tomb," Arthur muttered, his voice low. Merlin nodded. "The Sorcerer King was no ordinary man. His legacy is bound to the very fabric of magic itself." Suddenly, the passage widened, revealing a massive chamber. In the center of the room stood a towering stone door, its surface covered in intricate carvings and ancient symbols. At its base lay a pedestal, upon which rested a single, glowing crystal. "The key to the door," Merlin said, stepping forward. Arthur approached the pedestal cautiously, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. "It seems too easy," he said, glancing at Merlin. "Nothing about this will be easy," Merlin replied. As Arthur reached for the crystal, the ground beneath them trembled. From the shadows emerged figures of phantoms of the past, warriors and sorcerers who had served the Sorcerer King in life and now guarded his tomb in death. "They will not let us pass," Arthur said, drawing his sword. Merlin raised his staff, the tip glowing with a soft, blue light. "Then we will have to convince them." The battle was fierce. Arthur moved with the grace of a seasoned warrior, his sword cutting through the air with precision. The phantoms were relentless, their ghostly forms flickering as they attacked, but Arthur held his ground. Merlin, meanwhile, called upon the magic of the earth and sky, summoning bolts of lightning and gusts of wind to drive back the spirits. His magic crackled in the air, filling the chamber with light and sound. The phantoms, though powerful, were no match for the combined strength of the king and his sorcerer. Finally, with a final surge of magic, Merlin cast a barrier that forced the remaining phantoms back into the shadows. The chamber fell silent once more, save for the soft hum of the crystal on the pedestal. Arthur, breathing heavily, sheathed his sword. "That was a broken bar more than I expected." Merlin smiled faintly. "It will only get harder from here." Arthur approached the pedestal once more and carefully lifted the glowing crystal. As he did, the stone door before them rumbled and began to slide open, revealing a long, dark corridor beyond. "This is it," Merlin said quietly. The final stretch. Meanwhile, Morgana stood before the entrance to the tomb. The necromancer at her side muttered incantations under his breath, the air around them thick with dark energy. She could feel the pull of the Sorcerer King's legacy, calling to her from deep within the earth. "We are close," the necromancer said, his voice barely above a whisper. Morgana nodded, her eyes fixed on the tomb's entrance. "Merlin and Arthur are already inside," she said, her voice cold. "We cannot allow them to reach the legacy before us." The necromancer smiled darkly. "Do not worry, my lady, they will not leave this tomb alive. The second part of the story will continue with Merlin, Arthur, and Morgana's race against time to claim or prevent the claiming of the Sorcerer King's legacy, where tensions rise, battles intensify, and decisions are made that could reshape the fate of the world." Merlin and Arthur stepped cautiously into the dark corridor, their footsteps echoing off the cold stone walls. The air was thick with the weight of ancient magic, pressing down on them with each step. Merlin's staff glowed faintly, casting long shadows ahead, but the light seemed to do little against the growing darkness that lay ahead. The energy of the tomb thrummed beneath their feet, alive with the power of the Sorcerer King's legacy. Arthur's face was set with grim determination. His sword was drawn, and he kept his eyes scanning the walls, wary of traps or ambushes. Merlin, though calm on the surface, could feel the immense power emanating from deeper within the tomb. This was no ordinary place. The Sorcerer King's magic was woven into the very stone, his presence lingering in every corner. They moved in silence, each step bringing them closer to the heart of the tomb. There was no telling what awaited them ahead, but they both knew that Morgana would not be far behind. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath them. Dust and small stones fell from the ceiling as the ancient structure groaned. A deep rumble echoed through the passageway, as if the tomb itself was awakening. "Merlin, what was that?" Arthur asked, gripping his sword tighter. Merlin stopped, eyes narrowing. "The tomb is reacting to us." Or perhaps a broken bar to her. Without another word, they pressed on. The tremor had unsettled them both, but there was no turning back now. They had come too far, and the legacy of the Sorcerer King was too dangerous to leave in anyone's hands, especially Morgana's. As they ventured deeper, the corridor opened into a vast chamber. In the center of the room stood an ornate, stone pedestal, and upon it rested a single, ancient scroll. The walls of the chamber were adorned with intricate carvings, depicting scenes of the Sorcerer King's rise to power, his conquests, and ultimately, his downfall. Merlin's eyes locked onto the scroll. He could feel the immense magical energy radiating from it, more powerful than anything he had encountered before. This was the key, the heart of the Sorcerer King's legacy. Whoever controlled this knowledge would hold the fate of the world in their hands. Arthur stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the scroll. "Is this it? The Sorcerer King's legacy?" Merlin nodded, but his eyes never left the scroll. "It's more than just power, Arthur. It's knowledge. Knowledge that could reshape the world." Before Arthur could reply, a familiar voice echoed through the chamber. "You're too late." Both men whirled around to see Morgana stepping out from the shadows, her dark eyes gleaming with triumph. Beside her, the necromancer loomed, his hands glowing with dark energy. Arthur raised his sword, stepping in front of Merlin. "Morgana," he growled, his voice low and filled with anger. Morgana's smile was cold. "You never could stay out of my way, could you, Arthur? Always so noble, always so predictable." Merlin raised his staff, but he knew the confrontation that had been inevitable for so long was now at hand. Morgana had her eyes set on the scroll, and nothing would stop her from claiming it. "You don't know what you're meddling with, Morgana," Merlin said, his voice firm. "The Sorcerer King's power destroyed him. It will destroy you, too." Morgana's gaze flicked to Merlin, her expression hardening. "You think I care? You think I fear the same fate?" "I will not be bound by the past, Merlin. I will reshape the world as I see fit. And no Onia, not you. Not Arthura will stand in my way. The necromancer stepped forward, his hands crackling with dark magic. I will handle the king, he hissed, his voice dripping with malice. Arthur moved swiftly, his sword flashing in the dim light of the chamber. The necromancer met him with a blast of dark energy, but Arthur deflected it with his shield, the force of the impact reverberating through the room. The two clashed, steel against magic, as the battle raged. Merlin faced Morgana, his staff glowing with blue light. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice steady but tinged with sadness. "This doesn't have to be your path." Morgana's eyes narrowed. "It's too late for that, Merlin." With a wave of her hand, she summoned a torrent of dark magic, hurling it toward him. Merlin countered with a blast of his own, the two forces colliding in a brilliant explosion of light and shadow. The ground shook as their magic clashed, the chamber groaning under the weight of their power. Merlin fought with everything he had, but Morgana was relentless. She had grown stronger, more dangerous. Her desire for the Sorcerer King's legacy had consumed her, fueling her power with an intensity that even Merlin found difficult to match. As the battle raged on, Arthur and the necromancer were locked in their own deadly dance. Arthur's sword flashed as he parried another dark spell, his movements fluid and precise. But the necromancer was no ordinary foe. He moved with unnatural speed, his dark magic twisting and coiling like a serpent. Arthur grit his teeth, pushing forward with a flurry of strikes, but the necromancer dodged with ease. With a snarl, the dark sorcerer unleashed a wave of energy, sending Arthur sprawling across the chamber floor. Morgana's voice rang out, filled with triumph. "You can't stop me, Merlin. The legacy is mine." Merlin's heart pounded as he struggled to hold back the tide of dark magic. He could feel the strain in his body, the energy draining from him with each passing moment. Morgana's power was overwhelming, and for the first time, doubt began to creep into his mind. But then, a spark of light caught his eye. The scroll. It still rested on the pedestal, untouched, glowing with the soft light of ancient magic. And in that moment, Merlin knew what he had to do. With a burst of energy, he sent a shock wave through the chamber, temporarily forcing Morgana back. He rushed toward the pedestal, his hand outstretched toward the scroll. "No!" Morgana screamed, sending another blast of dark magic toward him. But Merlin was faster. His fingers closed around the scroll just as the wave of magic hit him, knocking him to the ground. Arthur, seeing Merlin fall, roared in fury. He launched himself at the necromancer with renewed strength, his sword flashing like lightning. This time, the necromancer wasn't fast enough. Arthur's blade found its mark, piercing the sorcerer's chest. With a strangled cry, the necromancer crumpled to the floor, his magic dissipating into the air. Morgana's eyes widened in fury as she watched her ally fall. But she was undeterred. Her gaze snapped back to Merlin, who was slowly rising to his feet, the scroll clutched tightly in his hand. "You think that scroll will save you?" Morgana spat, her voice venomous. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Merlin. The Sorcerer King's power will destroy you, just as it will destroy me." Merlin looked up, his eyes glowing with a strange, otherworldly light. "It's not about power, Morgana. It's about balance. The Sorcerer King's knowledge isn't meant for conquest, it's meant to protect the world from itself." Morgana sneered. "Protect? You fool. The world doesn't need protection, it needs control. And I will be the one to control it." She raised her hands, summoning the full force of her magic. The chamber trembled as dark energy swirled around her, crackling with power. Merlin braced himself, ready for the final confrontation. But then, something unexpected happened. The scroll in Merlin's hand began to glow brighter, the light intensifying until it filled the entire chamber. Morgana's magic faltered as the ancient power of the Sorcerer King's legacy surged through the room, enveloping both Merlin and Arthur in its light. Morgana staggered back, her expression one of shock and disbelief. "What a broken bar, what is this?" Merlin's voice was calm, yet filled with authority. "The Sorcerer King's power is not meant to be wielded by one person, Morgana. It was never meant to control the world. It was meant to guide it. With a final burst of light, the chamber shook violently. Morgana screamed as the magic she had summoned turned against her, the dark energy dissipating into nothingness. She fell to the ground, defeated, her power drained. Arthur rushed to Merlin's side, his face filled with concern. "Are you all right?" Merlin nodded, though he looked weary. "The legacy is safe now. It will not fall into the wrong hands." Arthur glanced at Morgana, who lay unconscious on the ground. "What about her?" Merlin sighed. "She made her choice. But perhaps a broken brothers still hope for her yet." Together, Merlin and Arthur sealed the tomb, ensuring that the Sorcerer King's legacy would remain hidden from those who sought to misuse it. The balance of the world had been preserved, but at a cost. As they emerged from the tomb, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the forest. Merlin looked toward the rising sun, his heart heavy but resolute. The battle was over, but the fight for balance, for the future, would never truly end. And as they returned to Camelot, the legacy of the Sorcerer King remained a silent reminder of the power that lay hidden beneath the surface of the world, a power that, in the right hands, could protect the future, but in the wrong hands, could destroy it all.